Podcast und unser letzter Podcast aus Orlando, Florida und wieder ein ganz besonderen Gast. But Dr. Bob Winters doesn't speak perfect German just yet. I know we're working on it.
Nein.
But Dr. Bob is one of the leading golf mental coaches and has done a whole lot in that field. And today we've got some tips for you on how to approach maybe your mental game. But I thought maybe we could start off with you telling us who you are and where you come from.
Well, I don't know if we have enough time, but I'm probably one of the real pioneers in applied golf psychology. I started back when there really wasn't even sports psychology for golf. So I started back in the mid-'70s. I had done my master's thesis, well, two of them. One's on the effects anxiety and stress has upon modern golf competition. And the other was, looking at geometric dimple configurations on the surface patterns of golf balls. So I had both sort of a technological and a psychological impact. I started really studying, hypnosis and sports vision, sports medicine. And then I was introduced to, positive psychology, performance psychology. I met a man by the name of Dr. Bob Rotella at the University of Virginia, and he knew everything I was working. And one of the, first players I worked with, happened to bump into him in 1985, was Bernhard Langer, and I was talking to him about his vision and his eye set placement over the golf ball. And next thing you know, he goes on to win a couple of weeks later at the Masters and doesn't have any three-putt greens. And so the rest is history, and I did my PhD, and I've been working with players all over the globe. I was a collegiate golf coach. I have played golf at every level, junior, collegiately, Division I. I played professionally at every level, champions level as well. So I have about as deep a golf acumen as anyone in the business. I don't think anyone really has my pedigree. So I can say that without fear of contradiction, because I'm both a player, a coach, an educator, a sports scientist, and I've been with David Ledbetter now for 18 years. And so here we are today, talking to you, Paul Dyer, and great to be here.
Awesome. So our students over in Germany who are hoping to get the mental tip out of all this, they're hobby golfers, they enjoy their golf, we're not talking about tour players or anything like that, but still they come to me and say, hey, I think I need a mental trainer because I go to pieces on the golf course. And obviously we know there's a lot of pieces that fit into that whole puzzle, but what do you say to people who come to you and say, Dr. Bob, I need your help, I'm screwed up?
Well, the first thing, they recognize they need help. Okay, it's much like an alcoholic when they realize that they have a drinking problem or an addiction problem. They recognize it, they're aware of it, and they say, I need help. And it's really tough to help people that don't believe in anything wrong. And it's very hard to motivate people who don't want to get better. So people come to me usually when they're sick and tired of being sick and tired of just playing poor golf and just giving away strokes all the time. So the first thing I applaud them for is for coming in and seeing me. And then we just have to get to the core issue. What's going on? What is it that you're looking for? And so many of them have all of these expectations. They want to play really well, and they're really trying really hard, and they want it very badly, but they end up sabotaging their talent. After a couple of bad holes, a couple of bad results, they start to become very frustrated, discouraged. Their results don't match those preconceived expectations before they went out and played. So now they end up discouraged and angry and frustrated, and they start trying new things. And before long, they're just a basket case. They're just all over the place because they haven't had a plan. They haven't worked their plan. They don't have any process. They don't understand the value of playing one shot at a time. And the biggest thing is they don't give themselves permission to just go out and go play. Because just by virtue of the German culture, I mean, it's a very technical, very perfectionistic, we've got to get it right. So they don't give themselves that freedom to free it up, and just go play. And that's really a big part of the game. You can be as technical and as efficient in the motor skills as you want, but the ability to play, to be artistic, to be creative, to be imaginative, that's really where I come in.
Well, I think you've probably described almost all the golfers on the planet. I certainly found myself right there. And you said a couple of interesting things about, I played golf with some students this week in Orlando, and we certainly had one guy who was fitted that just exactly, you know, got frustrated.
Sure.
Because, I mean, when we play golf, it's not a game of perfect. There's another book by somebody else.
Yes.
And it's dealing with that and understanding it's a marathon and not a sprint is something that I still find difficult. We all do, right? I mean, we all get upset about bad shots, and being able to deal with that is something that I see a lot with my students.
Well, the first thing, you know, that perhaps all of your, you know, viewers and listeners, if you think about this, I mean, what's the first thing that people ask you when you come in off the golf course? They don't ask you, hey, did you stick to your game plan today? Did you play one shot at a time? They don't ask you that. The bottom line is they ask you, what did you shoot? What did you shoot? And then you have to ask yourself, why are they even asking me what I shot? The only reason people are asking you what you shot is because they're concerned about where they stand in comparison with you. So it's this notion of the pecking order, comparison confidence. So if you have, you know, shot a lower score, say you shoot 85, and someone who you know, recognize as a good player at your club shot an 88, and you're going, ooh, you know, George is, you know, the best player here. I cut him by several strokes. Ooh, you know, I feel pretty good about myself. Or, and however, another person comes up and they say, hey, Tommy, what did you shoot? And they said, I shot 82. And they go, oh, you know, I shot 78. I cut you by 4. Then they go over to another guy, hey, Timmy, what did you shoot? So they're done with you. So when people ask you, what did you shoot? That's the bottom line. Everybody asks that. What'd you shoot? What'd you shoot? So we get lost in this battle of the scorecard. And so when we go out, we start thinking score, and we start thinking, I have to shoot this, or this is a tough, you know, hole, or I need to beat my handicap. And to have that type of a mindset, I tell you what, you're already done before you put, you know, the tee in the ground. You're already putting yourself back. You're playing the game of numbers. You're playing the game of counting, the game of trying to meet expectations. And that's why, if I could help, you know, every player who's having a little bit of problem, just learn to say, hey, what is it that I can, you know, have control over? It's one. It's this one shot right now at this moment. If I really do a good job with this shot and then accept it and move on, I'll get to the next shot. And we do that over and over and over. And that's really where the mental discipline comes in. And I don't care if you are Bernhard Langer, I don't care if you are Tiger Woods, or you are a Lydia Ko or a Michelle Wie, it doesn't matter. Everyone has to learn this game. And if you don't learn this game the right way, you'll always be frustrated.
And then a lot of these people look for the problem immediately in their golf swing. You know, I mean, you've seen it many times that, you know, there was a horrible process or no process at all. We got stuck playing here, actually, behind a four-ball who were taking way too long. And it's difficult to stay in process when you stood on the tee, you're waiting on your driver, and and then suddenly they've gone. You're okay, right? It's me now. I'm going to go. And
that's right.
And you know, hit a bad shot, and you're like, oh, I sliced it, and maybe I did this, and maybe I, you know, and we know so much about motor learning that you don't change your swing in 10 seconds and change it back again.
No.
Therefore, but people do look for that because there's not so much information out there about process and the way to mentally approach a golf round, but there's loads of information about how to slice it or not.
Well, let's just talk about, you know, the people who are, you know, viewing the program. I'm sure that everyone has this issue, and it is the core issue of every player. We have the expectation we want to go out and we want to play great golf. Granted, everybody does. No one wants to go out and say, wow, I hope I have a really average to bad round. Nobody wants that type. Everybody wants to play as well as they possibly can. So what is it that you have to do? I mean, most people have sort of the first tee jitters, the first tee nerves. We have expectations of grandeur, and then when we head to the first tee, the angst, the wantism, the triosity, it gets us very, very controlling and very nervous, and we start to over-control. We become very tight, and we start worrying about, is my swing going to show up? Am I going to play well today? And then we start worrying about all the people in our group. What will they think about me? Will I be good enough to play? Will I be able to keep up with them? I hope I don't hold them back. Do they think I'm a good player? They've got so much baggage going on in their minds that they forget the sole reason they're there is to move their ball from point A to point B to point C and to play golf. I mean, that's really what it's all about. So the best thing, and this is the number one tip that I can give all of you watching, is that you have to make it your day. Make your day, create your day, and create it by giving yourself permission when you step to that first tee. This is how I want to play. I want to play my game. And you have to let go of everybody else. You've just got to be able, Paul, just to dismiss all of the expectations or the judgments of others. That's a tough thing to do. I mean, to really just to say, I don't really care what anybody else thinks. I do care the way I think. So you have to remember, the trilogy is this. It's about me, my ball, and my target. And when you really think about that, now you've got some real power, because we're going to play one shot at a time. But we're going to play me, my ball, and the target all day long. And if you just have that focus, just one after one after one until you're done, that's the mantra that you should actually, embrace. So there's a lot of stuff, I've just said here. I mean, just the ability to compartmentalize. We always talk about golf being a very mental game. I think a lot of people think it's more physical than mental, but action follows thought. If your head's not in a good place, this will not be in a good place. So that's why we want to have a very directed, a very purposeful mind, a very specific target, a very simple swing key or swing image, and then we just want to give ourselves permission to go play. It's a lot easier to talk about than it is to do, but that's the first thing you got to realize. You've got to be able to step up on that first tee and say, you know what? I'm going to give myself permission. If you've never done it before, it's a very liberating experience. It's a very scary experience, because most of us have played with these mental handcuffs of, oh, I have to, I must, and what's everybody else, going to think about me. So we have to sort of unlock, those mental handcuffs, put them down, and say, if it is to be, it's going to be all about me. And so I'm going to go out and go play my game.
It's a really awesome tip. But that's got to be practiced, like anything else. Like I practice my wedge game, I've got to practice taking one shot at a time. And I'm sure a lot of people will say, hey, that's awesome, I'm going to go out and do that.
Sure.
And you maybe take the first shot one at a time, and the second, and the third, but the longevity in a round of golf is the challenge, right?
And well, that's the whole point. People say, wow, this person, he just makes it look so easy. Well, they probably have perfected this easiness, through many, many months and years of dedicated practice to say, this is how I want to do it. And that's why we sometimes say, this process, it sounds very boring, but that's where boring's beautiful. You just keep doing the same good stuff over and over and over. Now, that's not the same thing that Einstein said. He said insanity was when you were doing the same thing over and over, but we're expecting, a different result. No, I mean, the point I'm talking about is every shot you have in golf is a new shot. It's a new creation. But you have to have this foundation for stepping into each new shot, each new context, and have a foundation that says, this is how I do it. That's where the consistency, that is really where I call the ability, really comes through. Now it's repeatability, it's controllability, sustainability, and trustability. I mean, all of those abilities come into the ability to comply and adhere to saying, this is what I'm going to do at this point, at this moment. Every shot's a new creation. I don't care if it is your 56th shot. On this shot, it's one. It's this shot. It's not like my 56th shot. It's this shot. It's a totally new, situation, and I've got to have this fresh mindset to say, here's how I'm going to hit it. So it's difficult to do, but once you actually get it, you go, wow, this really works. And it's almost like this light bulb going off in you. You go, oh, aha, yeah, okay, that's it. It's good.
Awesome. You touched on being nervous, angst earlier.
Sure.
I had a situation last week at the PGA show. I was giving a presentation on putting with PutView, our partners over there in Germany, and I was talking away about putting, and Jessica was hitting some putts, and we were doing a little lesson, and Jim McLean came and sort of stood in front of me and looked like this. And this is the first time it happened to me for a long time. I remember David Ledbetter coming and watching me give a lesson when I was like a year as an instructor, and I felt the same thing. As suddenly everything that I knew to be right was gone, and I don't know what I said in those 2 minutes. My whole world was concentrating, and I was like, look, this is Jim McLean. And he stood there and he gave a little shake of his head, and I was like, oh no, now I've said something wrong. He didn't like it, and it was an interesting experience. I haven't had that for such a long time, where the nervousness forces you into a place where you no longer know what it is you're doing. Is that something that happens with?
All the time. All the time. I'll give you a great story with David Ledbetter and myself. Many years ago, I had met him, and when I was talking, I think, to Nick Faldo, and David came up, and I wasn't trying to impinge on his work. I was just introducing myself to Nick at a tour event. And years later, when David knew that I was here in Florida, he asked me to come and be part of the academy. So on being asked, he said, let's go out and play golf. So we went out to Lake Nona Country Club, and it was really my on-the-job interview. David wanted to see me. He had heard that I was a good player, knew I had a tremendous background as a player and coach, and I started all these Nike golf schools across America. So we're on the first tee, so I'm up on the tee, and I grip the club, about a 440-yard par 4, a little dogleg to the right. I step up on the tee and I grip the club. And as I'm stepping into it, David asked me, he goes, Bob, he goes, who taught you how to grip the club? And I said, when I was 17 years old, I went to an Arnold Palmer Golf Academy, and Arnold Palmer himself came up, put his hands on my hands and said, Bobby, put your hands like this, and don't let anyone tell you anything different. So I looked at David at that time, and I said, what do you think? And he smiled, and he looked at me, he goes, looks pretty good. He said, it looks pretty good. And then as I'm stepping in, doing my routine, really getting my focus in the fairway, I mean, this happens to, the best people in the world. And it happened to me. I'm sitting here thinking, here's David Ledbetter, the world's #1 instructor. This is important. He's judging you, assessing you, evaluating you. Does this guy really know what he's talking about? And so I'm getting that. Now I'm self-aware. I'm not into my target. I'm now more worried about what David Ledbetter thinks of Dr. Bob Winters. So as I step into the ball, I tell myself, stop. I back off. And I actually reset. David said, what's wrong? And I said, had a mosquito fly in my ear. I didn't, but that's really the answer I gave. I said, I got a mosquito fly in my ear. So I reset, refocused, stepped in, and actually hit the ball about 265 yards right down the middle of the fairway. And David said, great shot. Now, we went on and played about 4 or 5 holes. Now, what maybe some of you don't know was that David Ledbetter was a very accomplished player before he became this teacher. But he was also a perfectionist, and he would get sometimes a little bit angry. But after about 5 holes, I think he was like 1 or 2 under, and I was, I think, 1 under myself. And we were having a great time. And I think on the 6th hole, which was a short par 3, I looked at him, I said, wow, we're having a great time. And he goes, I am having a great time. And we had this instant, trust, bond, alliance. And I said, I've got to come clean. I said, on the first hole, I was worried about what you were thinking about me. I was worried about what you were going to think about my swing, about how, I stepped up to the ball, my posture. I was worried about that. And I said, but I had to kind of get that out of my mind, and I went ahead and hit it. And so finally he smiled, and as you know, David has a great sense of humor. He says, well, you know what, Bob? He goes, when I stepped up there and you were watching me, I was thinking the same thing, So it doesn't matter really who you are. It just happens. And especially when you have someone who you value their opinion, they're a credentialed source, it puts a little bit on you. But what you have to actually remind yourself is, I know what I know. I know that I'm really good at this. I know this is my game. And what you have to do, you have to almost disconnect and discount from that person or dismiss them and get into your stuff. And that's a skill that I think almost every really good player, even at your local club, your venue, gets very good at. They don't really care who's watching, because if you're watching, they're probably thinking, well, I really don't care, or I'm going to show them something really good. All right? And I think we get this. We get this fear, this anxiety when we're little kids, because as parents, we have our children, boys and girls, and when they're 7, 8, 9, 10, they're in the pool, they're jumping in the backyard, they're playing games. They say, "Mommy, Mommy, Daddy, Daddy, look at me, look at me. Hey, look at me, look at me." All right, I'm gonna show you I can do it. And somewhere along the line, whether it's school or some type of the peer pressure, 12, 13, 14, we go into adolescence, we learn fear, and people go, "Look, who do you think you are? You're not that good. Or you think you're better than him? You think you're better than she is? You're a loser. You're terrible." And we start learning this sort of, instead of, "Hey, watch me," like, don't look at me, don't look at me. So we learn sort of this fear. So the fear that we have on the golf course is sort of a learned condition. And I always tell people that some of my most fearful competitors, they have a real fear of this sound. When you step up into a shot and you miss a shot and you yank it left out of bounds, and maybe the crowd goes, "Oh," all right. I've had a lot of people say they hear that twice. They hear it in their head before they step into, and then all of a sudden they hear it a second time when they see it. So what they thought about, they brought about. So it's being fearful, being nervous, it's a human condition. And what you have to learn is that everybody goes through it. I mean, even Tiger Woods, and I know what everybody's going to say, "Oh yeah, that's what they say." No, everyone's very fearful. They have nerves, but they have trained themselves to be able to handle themselves nicely in a stressful situation. I think some of the very best examples of that are emergency room people, EMTs, emergency medical technicians, paramedics. I mean, that's why we're called first responders. I know this for a fact because I was trained as an emergency medical technician and paramedic many, many years ago. I went through that training because I really wanted to experience it. So they are called first responders, all right? First responders, because when they get to an accident, they're going to respond and act in a very professional, structured manner to take care of the wounded and the physically and psychological trauma that's in front of them. They're not what we call first reactors, because if you had somebody there who was reacting to the horror, they go, "Ooh," and they'd be, you don't want that. But even when we get there, as a first responder, a paramedic, you have to do triage. You have to see, who's, the most hurt, who's the most critical, and then actually just break it down, who's the least. And you've got to take care of these people. So there is a very functional, structured program to deal with that in severe trauma. The same thing in golf. We have to have a plan, set in place so that we can actually follow that plan. And that's really why we have a routine. And it's a routine before we go out to go play. It's a routine in how we warm up. And hopefully that routine that we warm up gets us ready to go play on the golf course, because so many people, they'll drop down a couple balls, hit a couple balls on the range, and then they got to go to the golf course and say, okay, now I got to go play. They're not ready to play at all. They're not even warmed up. They haven't gotten their minds or their bodies ready to play. And that's why on the first tee, they're not playing golf, they're playing the game of hit and hope. I hit it and hope it goes down the middle. So there's not any foundation for what I would call superior or even effective performance. So we talk so much about confidence, but it's not so much about confidence. The confidence will come, but you've got to have some competence, you've got to have a plan, and you've got to have some type of structure that says, this is how I'm going to do it, to give myself sort of that security blanket that says, hey, everything's going to be okay. That's really what, is important, and that's really what I do for all of my players, especially for those people who are 15 to 25 handicappers, because in that range, these folks, they're sort of scattered in their thinking, and that's why their scores fluctuate so much, because they really haven't thought it out. They tell themselves, oh, I've got it today, ooh, I've got it today, and they'll shoot a good day because they think it's their swing. Okay, so their swing is there, but what happens if they hit a couple of bad shots and they go, oh my gosh, I've got to find it. So now they, instead of playing golf, they play the game of, I've got to fix my swing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you have a lot of students like that, we can help them.
Excellent. So, speaking of we can help them, if someone wants to reach out to you from Germany, how can they do that?
There's a lot of different ways people can get a hold of me. They can go to my website, which is drbobwinters.com. That's drbobwinters.com. They can actually get a hold of me here at davidledbetter.com. They can even find my articles at golfweek.com. And they can actually Google me. I mean, there's a million different ways they can find me. I have a lot of YouTube out. I have a lot of things in the vault for Golf Channel. But there's just a lot of different things, that they can do to actually reach me. But I can also be, reached at my email, and that is drbob, Dr. Bob, at drbobwinters.com. There's a lot of Dr. Bobs.
Yeah, there is, yeah.
A lot of Dr. Bobs there.
And if someone was to say, right, you know what I'm going to do, we come over in October and spend a week here, and we're here in January and spend a week here, and say, I'm going to come and I'm going to spend some time with Dr. Bob. What would that look like if someone was going to come and hang out with you for a day or two?
That's, exactly. So when they come, let's just take you through a day. We'll sit down, and I like to start, with just a real friendly breakfast. Let's just see really what their core philosophy is. Let's see exactly really where they've been. And so we sort of have a working breakfast. Then we'll come down here to the academy, and we'll go through some different assessments. And I'm just going to ask them, what do you do when you play your very best? And then what's going on when you're not playing your best? And what we find is that there's a big gap between players playing their best and then playing their worst. And what I'm trying to do is fill in all those blind spots and help them identify, because people will come into me, Paul, and they'll say, Dr. Winters, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm just not doing what it is that I know. And I'm always coming back to them. I'm going, well, do you want my opinion on that? And they'll go, yes, absolutely. That's why I'm here. And I'll go, well, one of two things. One, either you're lazy, you're not doing what it is that you know you need to do. And two, maybe you really don't know what it is that you're doing, when you're doing it well or poorly. So we really sort of find out what they're doing, what are those attributes that make them successful when they play their very best golf. And then, we actually identify what they're not doing well. I know a lot of people go, well, how come we're looking at all the bad stuff? Because if I can get them to turn their thinking around and get them moving the other way, totally opposite of what they've been doing poorly, they'll probably end up in a pretty good place. And then we'll actually do that for maybe 2-3 hours. Then, take a break, for lunch a little bit, kind of talk about, the morning. Then we'll go to the driving range, and then we'll take it to the golf course. I mean, it is a comprehensive, full day. It goes by just like that, but it's a lot of fun. And so when people leave here, they're metamorphosized, they're transformed. There's there's a difference in them because they finally, for the first time in their life, I don't care if they've been playing 40 years, 20 years, I don't care what level you are. I don't care if you are an elite tour professional on the European Tour or PGA Tour, or you are a 25 handicap player. I mean, I do the same thing with everyone. Everyone gets, the same information. They get me one-on-one. And they leave here transformed. They go, I've been playing the wrong game all my life. So now when they come, they find out, a different game.
I think that's huge. Understanding the game sounds
it's
sounds
huge.
Awesome.
It is the game. It's playing the game. It's understanding and understanding how you work, how you think, what your personal playing philosophy is. And so when they come here and work with me, that's what we talk about. It's coaching, it's teaching, it's learning.
Okay, Dr. Bob, thanks for so much of your time. You've been very generous. Again, thanks for speaking to you. Ihr könnt natürlich Dr. Bob erreichen, wie erklärt hat. Und wenn eine Übersetzung sein soll, info@ledbetter.de, schreibt uns und wir schreiben Dr. Bob. Und natürlich im Oktober und im Januar können Sie hier rüberkommen mit uns und Dr. Bob live erleben hier in Champions Gate. Vielen Dank fürs Zuschauen und bis zum nächsten Mal. That's it. Jess, you...